I want you to picture a scene with me.
Oh.
We're traveling back to 1970s Iran.
Setting the stage.
Exactly. We're in Tehran. Specifically, we're inside this religious lecture hall called the Hosseiniya Irshad. And when I say this place is packed, I mean there isn't room to drop a single sesame seed.
It's just wall-to-wall people.
Wall to wall. Forget about finding a chair, right? People are sitting on the floor. They're crammed into the aisles. They are even perched up in the windows.
Wow.
And everyone's eyes are completely fixed on the stage. But the man they're watching, he is not your traditional religious cleric.
Right, no turban.
No turban, no robes. Instead, he's standing there in a really sharp three-piece suit and a tie.
And smoking a cigar, right?
Yes, he's smoking a cigar. He's speaking French. But when this man speaks, the historical records tell us that even the minarets of the mosques seem to tremble.
That is, wow.
His name is Dr. Ali Shariati.
That striking image really captures the essence of what we're doing today. We are taking a deep dive into the materials surrounding a man who's often called the forgotten architect of Iran's revolution.
Yeah.
And it is this fascinating historical puzzle. Like, how does someone whose words engineered the very ideological foundation of the 1979 revolution, how does he somehow end up completely marginalized?
Even erased.
Exactly, erased by the very movement he helped create.
It's wild.
It is. But before we get too deep, it's really important to set some context for you, the listener. The source material we're unpacking today contains some incredibly charged political and religious themes.
Oh, absolutely.
It touches on everything from monarchy and traditional religious structures to Marxism and revolution. So I want to make it explicitly clear that in this deep dive, we are taking no sides.
Right.
Our goal is purely to unpack the ideas and the historical facts exactly as they're presented in the source material. We are completely impartial to both left-wing and right-wing ideologies here.
Just looking at the facts.
Exactly, to help you understand the historical puzzle of this incredibly complex figure.
And to set the baseline for just how complex this puzzle really is, let's look at a striking anecdote from a book called Lo'i Ayyam.
Oh, by the Pakistani writer Mukhtar Massoud.
Yes, so Massoud was actually in Iran during the days of the revolution, and he writes about walking around and asking people from, all walks of life, just a simple question.
Which was?
Who was the thinker and philosopher of the Iranian Revolution?
Right.
So he asked a director general at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The answer was Ali Shariati.
Okay.
He asked a merchant in the Grand Bazaar. The answer, Ali Shariati.
Same guy.
He even asked a professor at Tehran University. Same exact answer.
Universal agreement.
Completely universal. So naturally, Massoud goes to a bookstore right across from Tehran University, expecting to find, mountains of books written by this man.
Right, if he's the philosopher of the revolution.
Exactly. But he couldn't find a single book by Shariati. Not one. Instead, he only found this tiny, brief pamphlet about him. And the translated title of that booklet was Superman, Dr. Ali Shariati.
Superman.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. How does a man go from an obscure background to becoming a philosophical Superman and then a ghost?
Well, the journey starts in 1933 in a place called Mazanan.
Anzanan.
Yeah, it was a tiny, really remote village in the Khorasan region of Iran, right on the edge of a vast desert. Even today, its population is barely 1,500 people.
So it's tiny.
Super tiny. He was born into an environment where time practically stood still. He was raised in the house of a religious scholar, but the Iran he grew up in was undergoing rapid, violent convulsions.
Right, because the biggest turning point happening right as he comes of age is the 1953 coup.
Exactly.
There was a massive foreign-backed conspiracy that overthrew Iran's democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh.
And that effectively ended the constitutional monarchy.
Yeah, it handed absolute unbridled power back to the king, the Shah of Iran.
Wow.
And the Shah started aggressively pushing this brand of westernized modernism.
Very similar to what Ataturk had done in Turkey.
Exactly like Ataturk. He was trying to crush the influence of traditional religion, attempting to sever the roots of the local culture to rigidly align the country with the West.
But the populace didn't just accept this quietly. A resistance movement rose up against the Shah's autocracy, and a young Ali Shariati threw himself right into it.
But activism against an absolute monarch has a steep cost.
It really does. By 1958, his political activities landed him in jail for 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, and that period of imprisonment was crucible for him. When he was finally released, he managed to secure a scholarship. So in 1959, he leaves the dusty margins of Iran behind and lands in a place that couldn't have been more intellectually chaotic.
1960s Paris.
Yes.
Just imagine the sheer culture shock. This wasn't the Paris of casual tourism.
No, this was a Paris buzzing with existentialism, anti-colonialism, revolution.
And Shariati is suddenly mingling with philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre, a man who famously made atheism a core tenet of his existentialist thought.
He's also translating the works of Frantz Fanon.
Right, Fanon, who is writing the foundational texts on the psychology of colonization and the fight for African freedom. Shariati is even out in the streets participating in protests.
He actually gets arrested and thrown in a Parisian jail.
For protesting the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, right, the first prime minister of the Congo.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is the intellectual collision taking place in his mind. The dominant language of the intellectuals in Paris at that time, the fashion, was Marxism and socialism.
He was everywhere.
It was practically the religion of the educated class. So Shariati is observing capitalism and viewing it as inherently exploitative. Meanwhile, socialism is loudly chanting slogans of universal equality and economic justice.
Which really appealed to his own sense of morality.
It did. But the typical path for a young, educated person from the Middle East at that time was to just abandon their traditional faith, view it as backward, and adopt Marxism entirely.
But Shariati refuses to do that.
He absolutely refuses.
So instead of abandoning Islam for Marxism, he does something radically different. He looks at Islam through a socialist lens.
Yes.
He makes this incredibly audacious claim that must have shocked the Orthodox thinkers back home. He declares that one of the Prophet's closest companions, Hazrat Abu Dhar Ghifari,
Was the world's first socialist.
yes, the first socialist.
And he didn't just use that as a catchy slogan. He had deep sociological arguments to back it up. Historically, Abu Dhar was known for fiercely criticizing the early Islamic empires for hoarding wealth and demanding the redistribution of riches to the poor.
Right.
Shariati looked at that and argued that true monotheism isn't just about praying to one god. It fundamentally requires a society completely free from economic and political exploitation.
But we have to contextualize this, right? He completely rejected Soviet-style state socialism.
Oh, vehemently. He hated the kind of socialism that revolves around an authoritarian state controlling everything. He also entirely rejected the atheism of traditional Marxism.
So what did he advocate for?
He advocated for what he called a humanist socialism.
Right, so he's essentially taking the Western analytical tool of class struggle and applying it to his own Eastern Islamic framework.
He is weaponizing sociology.
Wow, yes. He turned his religion into an ideology where the core purpose wasn't just, individual private spirituality, but collective economic justice.
He was absorbing the knowledge of the West, the sociology, the critical theory, but doing it specifically to learn their tools so he could dismantle Western imperialism from within his own cultural context.
And in doing so, he found a spiritual father who had walked a very similar path.
Allama Muhammad Iqbal.
Yes. Shariati was deeply inspired by Iqbal. He loved that Iqbal was someone who had lived in Europe, studied philosophy there, but never sold his Eastern soul.
He managed to be entirely modern without losing his identity.
Exactly. And taking that inspiration, Shariati developed his own core concept for the Iranian youth, the return to self.
Return to...
He was telling them, don't blindly imitate Paris or London, but also don't just blindly follow the rigid traditions of the past either. Recognize your own roots, but understand them with a modern, awakened mind.
So, armed with this potent synthesis, Western sociological tools fused with Eastern spiritual identity, Shariati returned to Iran in 1964.
With a PhD in hand.
A PhD and a storm brewing in his mind. But the Shah's secret police, Savak, were already well aware of his activities in Europe.
Yeah, they arrest him right at the Tehran airport.
The moment he steps off the plane.
That is quite the welcome home.
Seriously. But the state couldn't keep him contained in those early days. Eventually he gets released, moves around, and finds his way to Tehran, where he steps onto his ultimate stage.
The Hosseiniya Irshad.
Now, to understand the seismic impact of his lectures there, you really have to look at who he was talking to. He wasn't speaking to traditional seminary students.
He was speaking to university youth.
Yes. Young engineers, medical students, secular thinkers who were awed by Western progress, intrigued by Marxist revolution, and entirely weary of traditional religion.
They felt it was an outdated relic.
Exactly. And Shariati made a brilliant psychological pivot. He looked at these disillusioned kids and told them, your problem is not Islam. Your problem is the Islam that is being told to you.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting in the sources. This leads us to the absolute core framework of Shariati's ideology.
The big one.
It's the most explosive concept we're looking at today, the dichotomy of red schism versus black Shiism.
This was an ideological earthquake because he opened up a chapter of history that the religious establishment had kept closed for centuries.
Right. So Shariati argued that to understand their current oppression under the Shah, they had to look back to the year 1501.
The Safavid Empire.
Yes, that was when the Safavids established themselves in Iran, and Shi'ism was formally turned into the official state religion.
And Shariati's argument was that kings don't want a religion that inspires people to question authority.
No, they want obedience.
Exactly. To maintain power, the Safavids needed a way to pacify the public. They needed obedient mourners, not rebels. So they took the historical figure of Hussein who died fighting a tyrant and stripped away the rebellion.
They transformed the religion into what Shariati called Black Shi'ism.
A religion focused entirely on mourning.
Right. It was about crying over the past, beating your chest over the oppression of Hussein centuries ago, and shedding tears to earn a reward in the afterlife.
And the psychological result of that, it puts the masses to sleep. It protects the king.
It creates a populace perfectly content to weep over historical injustice rather than stand up and fight the current ruler.
But Shariati dug up the 700 years of history prior to the Safavid Empire. He pointed out that for 7 centuries, Shi'ism had actually been a religion of rebels, dissidents, and revolutionaries.
Fighting against corrupt caliphate.
Yes, and he called this original authentic version Red Schism.
In Red Shi'ism, Hussein's stand at Karbala isn't just a tragic victimization to be mourned, it is an active, conscious revolution.
Hussein explicitly rejected the corrupt status quo of the ruler Yazid, knowing it would cost him his life.
His blood wasn't a call for tears, it was a blueprint for rebellion.
And we connect this to the bigger picture. You see the profound danger he posed to the regime. Shariati didn't just leave this as an academic theory. He revived an old concept that says, every day is Ashura, every land is Karbala.
Ashura being the day of that historical battle, and Karbala being the site.
Right. By pulling this concept out of antiquity and dropping it into the present day, Shariati was delivering an incredibly provocative message to the youth sitting in front of him.
He was looking at these college students and implicitly telling them, today's Shah is today's Yazid.
And you are today's Hussein.
You are living in Karbala right now, so what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to cry, or are you going to fight?
It is a massively powerful call to action.
It electrified them.
The youth felt like they had been handed a completely new identity. A belief system that had seemed passive or irrelevant to them just yesterday was suddenly a razor-sharp weapon against imperialism and dictatorship.
And the way this message spread is so indicative of the era. The lectures were recorded on cassette tapes.
The social media of the 1970s.
Basically, yeah. These cassettes were duplicated by the thousands, passed around university dorms, played in secret basement meetings.
Spreading his voice from city to city.
Exactly. And he gave the youth a new name. The Roshan Fikr, the enlightened thinker.
This was a new archetype. Someone fully modern, educated in the sciences, but deeply rooted in their faith.
Someone who prays, but also actively fights against political oppression.
But here's the catch. When you speak that loudly, and you challenge the foundations of how society operates, you make powerful enemies.
Yeah.
Shariati managed a very rare feat. He alienated the 2 biggest power centers in Iran simultaneously. He found himself crushed between the throne and the pulpit.
On one side, you have the throne, the Shah's secret police, Savak.
Notorious for their brutality.
Extremely. They looked at Shariati and saw an Islamic Marxist. In their confidential reports, he was declared the government's absolute #1 enemy.
They saw a man providing the ideological fuel that could lead to an armed rebellion.
But then, on the flip side, you have the pulpit. The traditional, conservative religious clerics hated him just as much, if not more.
They despised him because he was threatening their monopoly on religious authority. Shariati was telling thousands of young people, to understand your faith, you don't need a mullah to translate it for you. Read the Quran yourself.
Bypassing the clerics entirely.
Yes. To the traditional establishment, he was destroying their role as the necessary intermediaries between the people and the divine.
And Shariati didn't hold back in his criticism of them either. He was incredibly
Well,
biting.
he's fearless.
He wrote extensively about how furious he was that these traditionalists were reducing a revolutionary text to a book of superstitions.
Right.
I mean, he asked if the holy text was just meant for taking out divination, or for getting blessings when moving into a new house, or for tying up in amulets around a child's neck.
He really went after them.
He even mocked the clerics. He said they were the types who would claim to find the blueprints for the atom bomb or the spaceship Apollo 13 hidden in ancient texts. But they absolutely refused to grant him the right to extract fresh sociological meanings from it.
And because of this, the clerics weaponized their own terminology against him. They issued fatwas declaring him an infidel.
They called him a communist.
They even labeled him a Wahhabi.
Which is fascinating.
It is.
Yeah.
To understand why traditional Shia clerics would use Wahhabi as a slur against him. Wahhabism is a Sunni movement that historically rejects the veneration of shrines and the need for scholarly intermediaries, insisting on a strict reading of the text.
Right.
Because Shariati was telling the youth to bypass the traditional mullahs and go straight to the source, the clerics used that label to paint him as a heretic trying to destroy their traditions.
So he was completely isolated. The secular intellectuals dismissed him as just another religious zealot, and the religious establishment condemned him as a godless Marxist.
Ultimately, the traditional clerics even complained to the Shah's police, demanding they silence this mischief maker.
And in 1973, the Shah's government finally drops the hammer. The severe crackdown begins.
Savak forces shut down the Hosseiniya Irshad Hall entirely.
Shariati knows they're coming for him, so he immediately goes into hiding. Savak tears the city apart searching for him, and when they can't find him, they resort to this incredibly cruel psychological tactic.
They arrest his elderly father.
Yes. It was a brutal, calculated move. They knew exactly what kind of man Shariati was. They knew he couldn't bear the thought of his father sitting in a Savak interrogation room while he hid in safety.
So after 2 months of this psychological pressure, Shariati surrendered himself to the authorities.
But they didn't just put him in a standard jail. They threw him into the notorious Kumita Mushtrak.
A facility specifically designed for the torture of political prisoners.
For 18 agonizing months, he's kept in solitary confinement. 18 months in a damp, tiny cell where the psychological torment was constant. He couldn't even tell if it was day or night.
The regime subjected him to severe conditions, trying to break his spirit.
Their ultimate goal was to parade him on national television so he would publicly confess that his entire philosophy was wrong and that the Shah was a just ruler.
But he refused to break.
Deprived of pen and paper, he resorted to writing his thoughts on the walls of his cell using small pieces of charcoal.
Now, his eventual release in 1975 had nothing to do with the Shah showing mercy. It was purely a result of international geopolitical pressure.
Right, Algeria stepped in.
Exactly. The Shah was on a state visit to Algeria, and the Algerian government, who deeply respected Shariati because he had actively supported their own independence movement against the French years prior, they made his release a diplomatic condition.
But releasing him from Kumita Mushtrak just meant transferring him to a slightly larger cage.
He was placed under strict house arrest for 3 years. Savak agents surrounded his home 24 hours a day.
He was banned from teaching,
Banned from publishing any writing.
banned from speaking in public, and banned from having visitors. For a man whose entire existence was built on communicating ideas, taking away his words and his audience was a torture all its own.
He was suffocating.
Finally, in 1977, the Shah was feeling mounting pressure from human rights groups and rising tension in the country. So, trying to create a release valve, he ends the house arrest and allows Shariati to leave the country.
Shariati travels alone, eventually making his way to London.
But the shadow of Savak was long.
Very long.
Just 3 weeks after arriving in England, on the morning of June 19, 1977, Dr. Ali Shariati is found dead at the door of his room. He was only 43 years old.
Now, the official report issued by the British police cited heart failure.
Right.
But to his millions of admirers, and given the extensive historical context of how the Shah's regime operated, this explanation is highly suspect.
To say the least. He was a relatively young, healthy man with no prior history of heart disease.
And the Shah's throne was beginning to shake violently back in Iran. Savak maintained an active international hit list with dissidents like Shariati at the very top.
And their known methods included staging sudden heart attacks using untraceable poisons.
Exactly. To this day, the overwhelming consensus among his followers is that he was assassinated.
And the political maneuvering didn't stop with his death. The Shah saw an opportunity for a massive propaganda stunt. He tried to have Shariati's body flown back to Iran for a lavish state funeral with full royal honors.
He wanted to show the world, look, I respected this intellectual.
He was trying to posthumously hijack the man's legacy and pacify the angry youth. But Shariati's family saw right through it and completely outmaneuvered the king.
They absolutely refused to let his body return to Iran to become a prop for the regime that tortured him.
So instead, they had him buried in Damascus, Syria.
And the specific location of that burial carries a profound poetic weight. He was laid to rest near the shrine of Hazrat Zainab.
Right.
In the historical narrative of Shi'ism, she was the sister of Hussein, the greatest witness to the Battle of Karbala, and the one who carried the message of rebellion forward after the massacre.
She is the ultimate symbol of the resistance and red Shi'ism that Shariati spent his entire life preaching.
The Shah couldn't silence his voice in life, and he couldn't capture his legacy in death.
The news of his death was like pouring gasoline onto a fire that was already sweeping across Iran. Massive riots erupted in the universities. And just a year and a half later, the storm that Shariati had predicted finally makes landfall.
February 1979.
The revolution succeeds. The phrase Shah Raft, the Shah is gone, echoes across the country. And if you look at the footage of the millions of people marching in the streets, they're holding up posters with two faces side by side.
The traditional cleric, Ayatollah Khomeini, and the suit-wearing intellectual, Dr. Ali Shariati.
It genuinely seemed like his lifelong dream had been realized.
But this raises an important question, and it brings us to the ultimate cynical irony of Shariati's life's work. Yes, the revolution he theorized and fueled came to pass, but when the dust settled and the new state was formed, who actually took power?
It wasn't the intellectuals?
No. It wasn't the enlightened intellectuals, the Roshan Fikr, that Shariati had spent a decade cultivating. Power was rapidly consolidated by the traditional clerics.
The exact same religious establishment that had called him a heretic and tried to silence him his entire life.
The man who literally built the ideological engine of the revolution gets completely sidelined the moment the revolution is successful.
It's incredible.
And if you analyze it through Shariati's own historical framework, the mechanics of it make perfect sense. Shariati's philosophy of red Shi'ism was fundamentally built on questioning authority, rejecting the status quo, and maintaining continuous rebellion.
Which is a brilliant, highly effective weapon when you are trying to tear down a tyrannical Shah.
But once a new government takes power, even a government born of revolution, they suddenly don't want a public that questions everything.
Right, they need stability.
They need followers, not questioners.
So, in a massive repeat of history, just like the Safavids did 500 years prior, the new state resurrected Black Shi'ism.
They needed the obedience of the masses, not their protest.
Red Shi'ism was effectively suppressed all over again. Shariati was officially bestowed the title of martyr by the state, but his actual dangerous ideas about questioning religious authority were quietly locked away.
The revolutionary state basically adopted a posture of, he was a great man who helped us get here, but his ideas are no longer necessary now that we are in charge. He was reduced to an intellectual orphan in the very house he helped construct.
And there is a truly chilling detail from Mukhtar Massoud's book that proves just how quickly he fell out of favor. Just 1 year after the revolution, people gathered outside Shariati's father's apartment in Tehran to peacefully mark the anniversary of his death.
Yeah.
But suddenly, ambulances pull up to block the road, only medics don't jump out. Armed men pour out of the ambulances, fall upon the peaceful crowd, and beat them mercilessly to disperse the gathering. And among the injured that day was Shariati's own elderly father.
He became a hero whom everyone wanted to claim for credibility, but no one in power had the courage to actually listen to. Today, he still rests far from his homeland in Damascus. It's fitting to think of him as a bridge, a brilliant structural bridge built between East and West, between ancient tradition and modern rebellion.
But the tragedy of a bridge is that once people use it to cross over to the other side, they leave it behind.
Exactly.
Yet his legacy stubbornly endures. Even today, when young people feel hopelessly trapped between the overwhelming glare of Western cultural influence on one side and the strict, suffocating nature of traditional religious authority on the other, they still find refuge in Dr. Ali Shariati's words.
He still speaks to them.
Kings tried to lock him away, traditionalists tried to erase his ideas, but they ultimately failed, because truth does not require the endorsement of a crowd to survive.
And that leaves us with a deeply provocative thought to mull over, one that stretches far beyond the borders of 1970s Iran. Shoriati's entire philosophy was built on the absolute necessity of questioning authority and maintaining a state of continuous rebellion against the status quo.
Yeah.
But what happens when the rebels actually win? Can any society, anywhere in the world, actually survive and function in a state of continuous rebellion?
That's the question.
Or is the tragic reality of human history that every successful revolution is eventually forced to build its own version of Black Shiaism, its own rigid systems of unquestioning obedience just to maintain order and survive?
That is a heavy, fascinating question to leave you with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources today. We've explored the life of a man who made the minarets tremble and who reminds us all of the dangerous, enduring power of ideas. Keep asking questions, keep looking for your own roots, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.